Okay, I've shared it on tonight. Okay.
It's also muted.
Hi, everybody. You hear me now? Good.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So what's Sheila, what's the plan tonight?
Sorry.
What's the plan tonight?
So, welcome everybody. And tonight's topic is if not now, when?
The who?
If not now, when?
What on earth does that mean?
That's for you to tell us.
I have no idea what you're talking about. It's just too ridiculous.
Well, that was the topic that we chose,
I'm sure I didn't choose it, but you probably chose it. I just said yes, passively.
possibly.
What does it mean? What do you want?
I think it means,
I mean, you invented it, so what did you mean by it?
I think it means just how to approach your practice rather than to procrastinate, to address your mind and how it's looking at the world now.
Oh, so something like that. I don't know, whatever. We'll see what comes out of my mouth. Good, Sheila. Okay, thank you. Okay, people. All right. So we think we're here together, listening, thinking, analyzing. Yeah, basically it's advice, but deciding whether or not we want it, whether it makes sense. Because from the Buddhist point of view, we've got this marvelous potential to be less neurotic, less depressed, less angry, less arrogant, less silly, more kind, more wise, and more useful. So that's the bottom line, really, to the degree of perfection, which is what Buddha would suggest. So if anything we listen to helps us do that, then that's great. That's fantastic. Sangye charan, soke chodam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chonyen gi personam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog, sangye charan, soke chodam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chonyen gi personam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog. Basically, what it's saying, isn't it, that our mind is full of misconceptions. It's the simplest way to put it. So you could argue, therefore, the job that he's suggesting we do is remove the job of from here to Buddhahood is a process of removing the misconceptions from the mind, removing the layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of literally misconceptions. And this is a very curious way to say. It's a very odd way of hearing it, I think. We don't think like that, you know. Of course, the key to understanding that is the key to understanding the Buddhist approach to the mind, how the mind functions, or the contents of the mind. So really it indicates that you know, the mind has states of mind, conceptual state, we're talking a very gross level, conceptual states of the mind that are valid, reasonable, appropriate, therefore the source of our own happiness and the source of our ability to be of use to others. And the other lot are the opposite: delusional, neurotic, distressing, disturbing, the source of our suffering and the source of our source of why we harm others, basically. One way of putting it. So if we look at the world, it's pretty evident. We look at the suffering that goes on, certainly at the hands of other beings. If you look at what's in their mind, you know, that's why. That's why we do things. That's why we say things. It's within our mind. The mind is everything. So the Buddha is suggesting if we want to suffer less and be of use to others, then we have to look to our mind and begin to identify the neurotic states of mind, the delusional states of mind, and the characteristic they have at the level that we function at, which is conceptual, including all the emotions, is that they're misconceptions, which is an odd way of describing. We would never think that. We don't think like that. As we know we have anger and depression and jealousy and low self-esteem and arrogance and all the rest. We know those words well, but it's very surprising to hear that they're misconceptions. That sounds odd. That's Buddha's deal. I think if we would like the Buddhist approach, if we understand that, then we'll understand what being a Buddhist means. Quite literally. So you could say that there are a whole series of misconceptions that are rooted in the emotions, or other emotions are that we're referring to other, and this is what Buddha refers to as the afflictions, these mental painful states, these painful states of mental states of mind, mental afflictions. They're the emotions we talk about, like anger, jealousy, depression, these ones, anxiety. They seem very literally emotional. These we understand. But to hear that they're rooted in being misconceptions is a big surprise. Then you have the other misconceptions, which you could argue are more like what we'd call kind of philosophical viewpoints, whether or not there's a being who creates the universe, whether or not there's a thing that's called a soul or a spirit, whether or not things are permanent or whatever. These are kind of like what we call philosophical views, but they're still all the same in there being misconceptions. There are a series of misconceptions. So this is so in a sense, it's easy to understand. It is easy to understand that if you think a $50 note is 500, if you think a $50 note is 500, then we can see how that causes you suffering. It's very clear. You have a view, and therefore you have an expectation, and therefore you go out to spend it. You have a big expectation to get 500's worth. And so what's the consequence? You'll be bumping into reality. You'd only get $50 worth, and you'll be disappointed, upset, angry. So it's, in a sense, quite a simple concept. If you have a misconception about something and you treat it in such a way, and then it isn't that, so you'll be disappointed. Well, that's exactly what Buddha's saying, So he says that he's found from his own experience, for example, one of his first teachings is that things aren't set in stone. So the most obvious one, this is when he first argued, we came along in the Hindu tradition and he diverged in his own direction. They talk about there being this kind of permanent intrinsic energy called God. They might personify it exactly in the same way that the Christians do, but essentially the same energy. It's permanent, unchanging, and it's the source of everything else. Buddha would say that's a misconception. He's not being rude. He's not being argumentative. He's found out from his own experience, his own direct observation, that there is energy that's enlightened, profound, enlightened, wise, compassionate, but hasn't got that characteristic of being a creator. It hasn't got that characteristic of having no cause, being permanent, unchanging. They're the misconceptions. You'd say like that. And as I said, he got this information from what? Not from the sky, but from his own observation. So he says this view, then the other one, the view, similar philosophical view, that there's an intrinsic, permanent, unchanging little entity in here called self, or soul, or spirit, or me, I. He says, misconception. Misconception. It's not being kind of dogmatic. You have to believe in this, otherwise you're naughty. Nothing to do with belief. He's talking about reality. He's talking about reality. He says he's found it to be so from his own direct experience, but that isn't accurate. So he's not just saying, he's saying thinking that there is something that doesn't exist is a problem. That's why we suffer. This is why we suffer. This is across the board for the whole Buddhist approach. And a surprising way of putting it. We would never think we suffer because we have misconceptions, And because he's saying that they've been in our mind a long, long time. Of course, he talks that our mind doesn't come from a creator. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. That's a complete misconception. We don't also, nor are we made by our parents. They give us a body, yes, they do not give us a mind. That's a misconception, he would definitely say. So we understand when it comes to science, this concept of science is exactly really how Buddha talks, you know. Of course, he didn't use that word because we coined that word using Greek, you know, using the Greek language. That's exactly his approach. And we know the simplest level of, you know, proving things to be true is what we're all about. That's where they started arguing with what's his name, that Italian bloke. When he started arguing with the Christians, arguing with the Catholics. Then he burned him at the stake, isn't it? That's the Buddhist approach. The job is to find out what is true, what is real, what exists. That's his thing. All the way from here to what he says we can accomplish, which is the perfection of our mind, which is not physical, such that it is now in sync with how things exist. That's Buddhahood. That's our potential. So the reason, I mean, you could argue the reason that compels a person to achieve it is compassion, but the simple logical reason to achieve it is because it's our true nature. That's what he says is then we've achieved our normal state. But everything before that is mental illness. That's a way of saying it. It's a very curious way to put it. That's why just to hear it is fine, but we have to understand that, therefore, the Buddhist view of how the mind works. Then it'll make sense. Then it'll make sense. How to get in touch with reality. So one of the consequences of all the afflictions, the mental afflictions, the intense ones, the emotional ones where we, you know, literally are shaking. The quality, the main characteristic all those states of mind have is fear. This is very curious, but I think if we look at it, we'll see it's true. Fear. And what are we afraid of? Why are we afraid? Because we're believing in things that don't exist, with all these massive expectations that they be the way we think they should be, which is called attachment, and then panic attack and anger when they're not. It's a good way to put it, you know. This is how we suffer day to day. 1,000 times a day this happens. We're bumping into reality all the time. Got these misconceptions, and many are at the level of complete assumption. Hard to see them. They're so automatic because we've practiced them for countless lifetimes. We come into this life programmed with these misconceptions, with these mental afflictions. So our job is to identify them, stop believing in them, and eventually remove them altogether from the mind. Then happiness comes, sanity, clarity, fearlessness, and then compassion and kindness and empathy and everything else. This is the way to talk. Because they don't write it like this in the books. But you can deduce this from learning, you know. So it's the hardest job we'll ever do because we're addicted to these views. We're addicted to believing that things are permanent. We're addicted to believing that attachment is true. We're addicted to believing that anger is true. You know, these are viewpoints that are true. We're addicted to believing that what these states of mind cause things to appear back to us as is true. We hold on to these frantically as true. And that's the curious part. That's what makes it so difficult. That's what makes it so difficult to practice, to identify them. So, you know, it's like, I think how we think about the mind in the West, when we think about meditating and looking inside, we hear the answers are inside, all this kind of thing. We kind of we sort of don't know quite how to judge. And I think in our psychology, in our modern views of the mind, we don't trust the internal at all. We like hard science, like the brain, things you can see, you know. just thoughts and feelings. We don't even know how to, we don't think like that. So the thing is, you don't just look inside your mind and then think truth will reveal itself. That's like thinking, oh, well, if I keep thinking 1 + 1, now if I keep thinking mathematics, somehow it'll reveal itself to me. It'll all be in there somewhere. The answer's there somewhere. Well, you could say that. I mean, you've got to go do the work. Like you could say, you know, all botany is already there inside me. I just have to find it. Well, you'd have to do an awful lot of work. So why reinvent the wheel? I'll go check somebody who's already done it, and they'll tell you what they found. Don't just believe them. Go test it yourself, and then you'll see it's true. Same with the way the mind works. So here we're using Buddha's view of the mind. It's a very specific view. It's very, very unbelievably specific. Detailed, precise, you know, presentation of how the mind works, and then the contents of the mind. Detailed presentation. Based upon what? The observation of these holy beings who've presented their findings about the human mind. So no one's asking us to believe it. You know, there are a million psychologists in the West. Every day a new person comes up with a new plan about what the mind is. So it's up to us to look, check them out. So you could argue, if we do like Buddhist views, we do like Buddhism, we say we're Buddhist. I mean, if we don't know how the mind works, then how can we say you're Buddhist? I mean, how can you possibly say that? It's like you say you're a tennis player, but you don't even know what tennis is. It's rather silly. And most of us don't study the mind. You know, we like to read lots of books and things. We need to study it quite deep in detail if we want to learn to really understand how to be a Buddhist. It's really quite true, actually. It takes time. I don't know, I'm giving up here. I have to ask you I need questions now. Come on, Sheila, you have some questions. Ask me some questions, people. I'm sorry to be so boring. Ask me some questions, come on. So far, okay, I've said that. How long have we been? I've been 15 minutes. 20 minutes already. I just talked
for 20. Robina.
Who's that?
Suzanne.
Okay, darling, talk to me, Suzanne. Ask me your question.
Okay, this is a conundrum. So my brain gets fixed up on what my potential is supposed to be and what my purpose is supposed to be, and a fear of not living up to it or not finding it. And so therefore I end up living in the future and in that egoic kind of
Suzanne, I've totally lost you already. Maybe turn it into a question.
How do I how do I live up to my potential? Find my purpose, know my thing.
Live up to your potential. Yeah, I'm talking about potential to be a tennis player, to be thin, to be pretty, to be, I mean, I really mean it seriously. What kind of potential?
Okay. To use whatever gifts, my lived experience, what gifts I've been given to be in service to the world.
Okay, given, I have to ask you about that one. Who gave them to you?
Life.
Life gave them to you? That's very, very vague, Suzanne. I can't just.
Okay. Okay, so we spoke before recently about past trauma, and I want to go into something that uses that trauma to help other people. So help people out of addiction, help people who have been through significant life trauma. And I get really hooked on having the most maximum impact possible. And
what's your question, darling? Try and get to me a question.
I'm trying to get there. What am I trying to say?
I know. It's very broad. We're talking in a very, very, very big, broad way. Maybe bring it down to earth. Where's your problem?
How do I know I'm on the right path, chasing this idea that I've got about being in service to people in a particular role in life?
So what you're saying is you want to be helpful to people. And
yes.
In what way do you want to help people? What's the skill? Tennis, cooking? What is it? The skill you want?
Mentoring. I'm a teacher, but this mentoring.
So you want to mentor people in what area? Tennis, cooking? What's the area of mentoring that you want to cultivate?
Teenagers and parents, coming away from digital screens, whether it be vaping, whether it be so
You want
addictive
to help, so you want to
behavior.
help people lessen their attachment. That's what Buddhism
Yes.
refers to it. So how, so you want to help people lessen their attachment. So
Yeah.
if you don't know how to lessen your attachment, then you can't do that, can you, Suzanne? So back to
No.
basics, the answer is learn to know your mind. But then now, this is my point.
Yeah.
You can use Freud's methods. You can use your own methods. You can use Jung's methods. You can use 1,000 other people's who talk this way. Here, we're talking Buddha's method. So are you interested in the Buddha's method to this?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to know what attachment is. So tell me what you think it is from the Buddhist perspective.
Oh. Attachment. I think it is desire, the want for more, the attachment to outcome, fear.
Well, it's a whole, you just gave many answers. So you, I mean, attachment can't just be fear, because anger is also rooted in fear and jealousy is rooted in fear. So one thing you did say was attachment to outcomes. Well, the word we would use for that is called expectations, right? So like I said before, if you expect 500's worth from 50, then you will be disappointed because you're not in sync with reality. Would you agree with that? Well, that is a quality of what Buddha is calling attachment. It's it's a misconception in the mind about something that then causes you to expect something that you can't get from it. And we can all see, I think, can't we, that that's a big suffering we all have. It's one we can all identify. So fine, so then you need, if you like what you're hearing in the Buddhist approach, you just need to learn to practice it. And then every day, surely, as the degree to which you practice it is then the degree to which you can help others. So that is the answer to your question. So come down to earth. If you like the Buddhist approach, get valid teachers, do valid courses, do valid study, and do valid practice every day. And then you will learn from your own experience, as you just said, you wanted to do that. And then to that degree, you can recognize it in others, and then you can help them one step at a time, Suzanne.
The one step at a time. It's very important. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry. Good luck to you. Well done. Stay on track. Keep moving.
Okay.
Who else? Anyone else? Yes, sweetheart.
How do you meditate?
You what?
How do you meditate? How should one meditate?
Well, I mean, there are millions of techniques.
Well,
you
what's
know?
a good one?
Well, what for though? Why do you want to meditate? What do you think it means? What do you think you want to do it for?
To quiet my mind.
Okay, you want to quiet all your thoughts, yeah? Because?
So I can become calmer, I guess.
Okay, I understand. Good. All right. Okay. Well, actually, it's an incredibly difficult job. It's a really sophisticated outcome to have a mind that's more calm from learning to simply do some meditation. But it's possible, but it's like we've got to have a long-term view, right? So there's many advantages on the way to getting that calm that can also really be useful every day. So if we're taking this view that the thoughts in our mind that make us unhappy, which the ones that make us not calm, do you understand, are the neurotic ones, and are the thoughts and are the states of mind that are delusional, that are not in touch with reality. That's why they're distressing. So the Buddha is saying, yeah, he's got all his methodologies all lined out, it's all there, that we can learn to eventually, calm them. But on the way to doing that, you've got to do a lot of inner work as well, which is in day-to-day life, to be noticing them so that you can hear how they're thinking, hear the expectation of attachment, to hear the anger, to hear the disappointment, to hear it in your head, you understand, in your day-to-day life. So you can have a daily practice. So a typical thing that Buddha would start with is there's two kinds of meditation. One is called concentration or focusing meditation, where you're training your mind to stay on one thing. The key is in training. You're not going to get the result, but you're training it. So that's the kind of technique you want to try and start with. Just a simple technique. You get up in the morning, hop out of bed, and then ideally a Buddhist would have a little kind of altar. They'd have their room with their little seat where they like to sit down. You'd go pee, get yourself clean. You'd then sit down on your cushion or your chair, and you do a little practice. So it's a good start. So the start would be, we've done it here, haven't we? Like a breathing meditation, concentrating on the breath. We've done that, haven't we?
Yeah.
You'd start with that, but don't have any fantasy that suddenly your mind will calm down. Do you understand? Immediately, it's like a joke. It's like thinking the first time you pick up a tennis racket, you're going to play tennis. Not likely. So you've got to start somewhere. So knowing it's possible to calm your mind down, but also not just. But one of the misconceptions about that is that they'll kind of make them all go away. That's not possible. So one of the advantages, I'd say it this way, one of the advantages of doing a practice like that, just start with 5 minutes. You focus on your breath, you sit down, and I'm going to watch my breath. And I'm going to, as it goes in and as it goes out. And every time it wanders off, you bring it back. You're training yourself to stay on one thing with no expectation that you're going to be there, because it's quite advanced. Get concentration even for a minute. Do you understand? So the advantage, though, is not just that your thoughts will go away or hope they'll go away. The big advantage of doing that is that when you open up your eyes, like we talked before, and go down to the kitchen, and there's hubby slurping his coffee, that simple example, you're going to be noticing what's in the mind. We know the results of the mind, which is agitation. We know that, but one of the things we have to learn to do is become familiar with what is actually going on in the mind. Do you understand me? So you train your mind to focus. You purposely don't involve in the thoughts, but you can't help but hear them. You understand? Then when you go down into the kitchen or whatever in day-to-day life, because you're practicing focusing, you're practicing stabling, trying to watch something without wandering along or being mindless, then when you're not on your cushion, you start to become more conscious of all those crazy thoughts. And so you can learn to identify them. And that's the job that's difficult, but that's the job that's necessary. So Buddha talks about there's attachment, and there's anger, and there's jealousy, and anxiety, and low self-esteem. Most of the time, they're just like a big soup. We can't even identify one bit. Do you understand? So the skill to do that is the real skill of learning how to live your life well. Because then you can start to hear, slowly, you start to even hear the conceptual story that's there. All we notice now is the agitation. All we notice is now the result of it, because we've not paid attention to our thoughts. So we need to focus the mind. We also need to learn to deal with the thoughts. It's like being a cognitive therapist. You hear the thoughts, and you hear it, you're feeling yourself being irritated. That's called anger. So you talk to yourself, because you're noticing it, not just buying into the truth of it. Do you understand? You talk to yourself. It's okay, girl. It's just this, just annoyed, blah, blah, and you can't. And literally, then you actually calm your mind down by talking yourself through it. That's the method in day-to-day life. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And we get better and better and better at that job. Honestly, we become more and more, and the deeper the concentration we can cultivate, if we're serious, is the subtler our mind goes, the more sophisticated and clever we are in hearing all the endless conceptual thoughts that just end up feeling like a big soup of emotion. We've got to dig deep into that emotion to start to get more clarity in hearing the thoughts. Do you understand that concept? That's the long-term way to see it. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So start somewhere. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
said there are 2 types of meditation.
Yes.
There's the breath meditation.
Well, no, not so much breath. Breath is an example of an object to focus on. It's called concentration meditation.
Samatha, where you're focusing on.
Shamatha is the result of the concentration. You've accomplished concentration, yeah.
There's another type thing.
Huh?
You said that there was.
The second one is known, but each of these is known in terms of their result. So the first one is known as calm abiding, or in Sanskrit, And if you've accomplished that, you're you've got a very sophisticated mind. You're able to go to a much more subtle level. You've completely subdued the conceptuality. You've completely subdued the senses. You've gone to this much subtler level of mind. And you can get that. You've got to go, give up your wife and go off to the mountains for several years, and you might accomplish that. But that's the type of technique the first one is, so we can train. The second one is known in terms of its result, and that's called special insight. So it's known as insight meditation. The Sanskrit for that is vipassana. So there are many techniques that Buddha taught. So one that's very popular in the world, that's known almost, it's not almost like a little section of Buddhism, it's called Vipassana, but it's one type of technique where you, on the basis, you'd start with your first mode of meditation, you get some focus, then you'd use that focus and you go to the second mode, and then the meditation, I think, I've never done it, is that you would then pay attention and notice the different sensations in your body. And the goal of this for the Buddha is to get insight into how how everything is impermanent. So that's a method of developing insight into impermanence. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
But there's many other type of insight meditations, many things. We've got to get insight into all these things that we're discussing here: impermanence, emptiness, bodhicitta, karma, all these views of the Buddhas about how things exist. We need insight into all of them, you know. Do you understand me?
Can I guess?
Huh?
Just a follow-up question?
Yeah, please.
It's also, I know,
Uh-huh.
I've seen this other meditation, Mahamudra.
You've seen what?
Mahamudra,
That's right.
is that the same thing as Vipassana?
That is, no, it's Mahamudra is a type of meditation developed in India by the great yogis of the past, and in different traditions. In our tradition, that's one of the techniques. It's similar to one that's called Dzogchen in the other traditions in Tibet. And Mahamudra is a meditation technique that uses both of these modes of meditation, concentration and insight, and it's a specific approach to getting insight into, at a more sophisticated level, emptiness, the final way that things, the most advanced way that things exist, that things don't have an intrinsic nature. It's a method of getting insight into how things lack an intrinsic existence. So that's kind of a final one. But I mean, we can all try it. You know, Lama Yeshe's book on Mahamudra is highly recommended. Do you understand? It's using both modes of meditation. And getting insight, not into impermanence, but into emptiness, into how things exist ultimately. That's the method. We can all try it. It's delicious. Lama Yeshe makes it very easy in his book, you know. Do you understand? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Someone else on this television screen? Anybody else? No. Elaine, any questions? Eileen, questions, sweetheart? Always Eileen's got a question. Ask me a question, Eileen.
I always have questions, but sometimes I think, you know, they're so silly because you describe everything, because you said, if you're going to be on the Buddhist path, you have to know how the mind works, the way the mind works, and the content of the mind. So what you just described is it, right? In other words, how the mind works is misconceptions. In other words, it's all my expectations, my anger, my this, my that. Is that what you mean when you say how the mind works?
No, more specifically, no. They talk about the epistemological model of the mind, and that's technically, quite literally, how the mind works. A very detailed, very fascinating presentation of literally the way mind functions. And this has nothing to do with neuroscience, because we're talking here about the non-physical part of us called our mind, you know. So it's an incredibly sophisticated, extraordinarily interesting presentation of the way our sensory consciousness, and then two, our mental consciousness, literally how they function. And it's coming directly from the experience of the great yogis who have seen the mind in their subtle meditation. So it's incredibly fascinating. The very first level there, we often talk about it, the very first discussion in the epistemological model is that we have to learn to distinguish between sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. So sensory consciousness is eye consciousness, ear consciousness. So learning very clearly how they function and what it is that they cognize. And then we have to learn to distinguish that from the mental consciousness and how it functions. So the grosser level of mental consciousness, which is the only level we function at, is conceptuality, thoughts, opinions, viewpoints. That's the level we function at, and that includes what we would call emotions. So that's all those So within those, the conceptual states of mind, you've got that division of negative, positive, and the mechanics of the mind. So the negative or neurotic conceptual states of mind are the afflictions like attachment, aversion, jealousy, or even you could argue this, the philosophical views of grasping at things as permanent, grasping at things as inherent. They're all literally conceptual states of mind. So this is already fascinating. And the way they talk about conceptuality, how it functions, is unbelievably mind-boggling. That's conceptual. That's so the mental, the sensory and the mental. Then already I've even begun to talk of the second model of the mind. The second one is the psychological, and that's where we get into the mental consciousness and how it's divided, like I just said, into the neurotic deluded ones, into the valid and virtuous ones, and into the third category that I call the mechanics of the mind, the ones that are neither negative nor positive. That's the contents of the mind. That's the psychological model of the mind. That's what I'm talking about, Eileen. You need to study it. So if you want to study a good book of it, one that's written for us modern people by Geshe Tashi in London 30 years ago, it's one of his series of books that are all published by Wisdom, and it's called literally Buddhist Psychology, and it's by Geshe Tashi.
Yes, thank you.
That's where he describes all of this. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Do you know the book I'm talking
Yes,
about?
I do. Thank you. That's
the
serious.
answer. That's the answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you understand me? And anything I
thank
say in this room is based on those things, is based on the Buddhist view of the mind from the epistemological point of view and the psychological point of view. That's all I'm talking. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. And it is unique because he is not describing the brain. This is the point that's so shocking to us, Eileen. We don't have a view like this in the West. We simply don't have a view like this. We only talk about the brain. As far as we're concerned, the mind is the brain, and that's it. We're talking about the internal, subjective, cognitive process itself, which is incredibly sophisticated and can only comprehend this if we take the view of this ability to get to single point of concentration. Do you see my point? These genius Hindus, before the Buddha, these Hindus came up with all this stuff from their own direct observation within their own mind. It's totally fascinating, and it's incredibly sophisticated. But most don't know about this. And people just talk about mindfulness, as if that's all the Buddha talked about. It's like the most loaded rubbish you've ever heard. Understand, people? I mean, I'm being blunt about it. But Suzanne understands because she knows, because I'm from Melbourne as well, you see. That's it. Are you all happy about Albo? Yeah. That's what we call our Prime Minister. Mr. What's his name again?
Albanese.
Albanese. They'll call him Albo. Australians shorten everything. Albo.
Yeah.
He just got in. He won huge election.
We're happy Dutton's out.
What?
We're happy Dutton's out.
The happy dozen. What's that?
Dutton, the Liberal Party.
Oh, Dutton's out. No, he lost his seat, didn't he? That's right. That's right.
Our version of Trump.
So they say. Exactly. No, he kept quoting the other bloke. He kept quoting Trump, so then we chucked him out.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions, people? Sweethearts? Questions? No.
Well, you talk about states of mind, positive, negative, and you said.
Well, I call that's my term.
Right.
They normally call them negative, positive, neutral. But neutral sounds weird.
And so what comprises the neutral?
Well, that's not, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, but now you ask the question, it means you're ready to hear it. You've got the neurotic deluded ones, like attachment and aversion, all the dramas, the drama queens, that aren't in touch with reality. It causes a lot of pain. Then you have the valid ones, which are also can be emotional, love, compassion, kindness, but they're valid because they're to some degree in sync with reality. Do you understand? The third lot are utterly necessary states of mind to function. Concentration, good memory. For example, there's two, right? You heard those states of mind, those. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. That's why you've got to understand those concepts in Buddhist psychology. They're neither of those, but they're crucial. In other words, a murderer needs concentration. Would you agree with that? And a meditator needs concentration. A sniper, if they didn't have good concentration, they'd do a terrible job. So concentration in itself is neither good nor bad. It's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but it's crucial if you want to know your own mind. It was crucial if you want to learn to develop wisdom, for example. You see what I'm saying? So there are some states of mind that don't have a virtuous or a non-virtuous characteristic. And that's why you've got to understand what Buddha means by this, because we don't talk that way in our culture. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
Are you sure? You hear what I'm saying?
So besides concentration, what would be some other?
Well, another one is discrimination. There's a part of our mind that every millisecond is working. As we're walking down, even as we're looking now, we're distinguishing between blue and red and glasses and you and there's here and chair and grey and red. There's a million things happening just through our sensory consciousness, right? We're distinguishing this between this. We're distinguishing between this and that, aren't we? So one of the crucial qualities we need to do the work internally is to distinguish between a virtue and a non-virtue. To distinguish between anger and jealousy in your mind. You see what I'm saying? Discrimination, it's called. It's vital. It's happening every millisecond. And it's utterly necessary to have that correct, to have it on the job. So these are the third category of states of mind that are neither have the characteristic of virtue nor have the characteristic of non-virtue. Do you see what I'm saying? That's how they talk. That's how they talk. Do you understand me? Many of those. Concentration, discrimination, good memory, which is mindfulness. People think some kind of bloody virtue. It's not a virtue. Thieves need mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. In your concentration in the morning, in your meditation, you're trying to use this capacity to stay on the topic. That's called mindfulness. So that's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. You see what I'm saying? That's the meaning. That's what I call the mechanics of the mind. They enable you to function. Do you understand me? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
And we're talking about conceptual states of mind here. Because the sensory also has these factors. The sensory can also has they have the different parts. The sensory are not anything to do with the virtues and the non-virtues. No way. That's why I always use that example about I see a pretty cup. You've heard me say that example 20 times, Sheila. Sensory is eye consciousness, which all that can see is shape and color. So then you ask, where does pretty cup come? That's your mental consciousness. And it's opinion, it's called attachment. Or if it's an ugly cup, that's aversion. So senses is one, mental is the other. Sensory and mental, and they're utterly different, but working hand in hand. So we have to distinguish between them. You understand? Do you understand? This is what's studied in Lorig. Mind and mental. Mind, they call it mind and mental factors, or mind and awareness is the title of the text. What else, people? Yes.
How do we have discrimination, but also not be caught up in like inherent existence and dualistic appearance? Like, would it be that, how is my discrimination not be tainted by?
Not be tainted. No, it's not a question of not being, it's not a question of not on or being tainted, not a question of that. All I'm getting at is there are millions of parts of our mental consciousness. Like everything that exists has bits and pieces. If you analyze fingers, you've got parts and tendons and skin and nerves, isn't it? And you have to learn to dig deep and go into each of the parts and know their function. Well, the same with the mind, and we're talking the subjective cognitive process itself, not the brain. And that's what you've got our concentration for. So you can learn to identify there's discrimination working, there's intention, there's attention, there's mindfulness, there's concentration, there's love, there's compassion. There's a million things every second, a million thoughts a minute, and they've each got a name. So to learn to first, you have to learn the theory first. Absolutely got to learn the theory first. You understand? How can you
The theory
of the mind? How the stuff I'm talking about?
Okay.
You can't just do this. Like you can't just look at a garden. You can't just look at a garden and it'll become evident that there's weeds and herbs and this and that. You've got to learn the bloody theories first. You have to have the theories first. That's your basis. And then you start investigating the garden. Oh, there's a weed and there's a herb. You start to do same with the mind. That's what I mean.
So like discrimination is
the ability, literally a bare bones function, to be able to distinguish between this and that. And it's happening every billionth of a second. It's never not working.
if I'm discriminating between a this or a that, am I getting stuck in inherent
But
existence?
you got a view of discrimination, something's completely mistaken. It's got no quality to it. It's not a judgmental thing. It's literally distinguishing gold and blue, square and round, up and down. And in your mind, when you're hearing your thoughts, the discrimination part of your mind, hand in hand with all the other bits, is able to identify that's a loving thought, there's an angry thought. That's what I'm talking about. It's a technical skill.
So discrimination, not judgment.
It's not there's no judgment.
Mhm.
Zero. That's why it's hard to get the right word in English, you know. But it's discrimination, or it's not distinguished. You distinguish between. Distinguishing is better. You distinguish between this and that. It's simple. Do you understand? That's what it is. It's not judgmental at all. Nothing to do with that. That's got a quality. That's got to be a delusion. This is like a technical part. That's why I call it a mechanical part of your mind. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you. I think I get caught up on
No,
discrimination.
no, nothing to do with that. So if you're a good mathematician, you need that to be able to distinguish between this and that. Good gardener, a good murderer.
Mhm.
So that's why these have neither, all these other ones don't have a characteristic of being virtuous or non-virtuous.
Mhm.
Try to say.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. What else, people? Anybody else? Anybody else?
Could you,
Go on.
explain the difference between anxiety and fear?
Well, okay, we have all these words. We just make. I mean, again, anxiety is a word. I don't know how long we've been using it and how long it's been in our culture. But I bet it's quite recent. It's a bloody Greek word. We love all these Greek words, you know. It's probably Mr. Freud came up with it. I have no idea. It's just, for me, anxiety, using these words, fear, in our culture, I think we don't use fear all the time that often. We wouldn't say, oh, I feel, if you see a person who's angry, they're shouting, isn't it? A person who's really volatile, they're screaming and shouting, then we would never say, oh, they're having a panic attack, would we? Would never say they're feeling anxious, would we? Do you see my point? We'd say they're angry and we criticize them. How dare you be angry? But if you analyze their behavior and the words that they're saying and how their heart's racing fast, if you didn't hear their words and you had another person over here having a panic attack, you saw these two people, you just see people hyperventilating, wouldn't you? You wouldn't know what they were saying. Then of course that's fear. Anger isn't fear literally, but fear and panic and anxiety are being expressed by a person who is angry because they simply can't cope with the attachment getting what it doesn't want. Now you see what I'm saying? So of course it's based in fear. It's completely example of incredible fear of the thing happening that they don't want. Well, that's all anxiety is. Anxiety is a milder version of not getting, either thinking that you'll get what you don't want, or thinking you won't get what you do want, and chewing over it and worrying about it and going on and on and on about it. And literally, sometimes when it's extreme, where heart beats fast, you'll think you're going to have a heart attack. That's anxiety, and that's based on attachment. Attachment being this junkie that always wants what I want. So especially if we suppress for so long, if we've suppressed our thoughts and not dealt with our experiences as they happen, then it comes out at some point, and that's what we mean by anxiety. It's like this stress that kind of comes up at some point. Do you understand me? That's my analysis of it. So all of those unhappy states of mind are rooted in fear. Of course, they're rooted in fear because they're disconnected from reality. Because attachment is exaggerating the deliciousness of that thing you're craving for. Anger is exaggerating the ugliness of the thing you don't want. And you have these two come together. That's anxiety, it seems to me. I don't know, I'm just talking loosely. Can you hear me? I mean, how do you describe anxiety? What would you say it is?
For me, anxiety is projecting fear on a situation, that something's not going to happen, that it's going to go wrong.
Yeah, that's what, thinking that something you don't want will happen, or thinking that what you do want won't happen. There's only two options, isn't it? So attachment is hope, craving for it to be a certain way, and then panic attack that it won't be. That's what exactly what anxiety is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So when people have a panic attack, it's an extreme example of that, isn't it? Like you really believe you're going to die. You completely can't cope. Everything's completely drama. It appears that way. You believe that way, and nothing will convince you otherwise. Isn't it? That's attachment and aversion built up, undealt with.
So is there also a place for fear where you're encountering a lion?
What, darling?
Or, like, is there another place for fear, where let's say you encounter a lion?
Or nearly
and
get
it's
attacked in the car, or someone assaults you, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Yes. You nearly crash the car, you know, your heart beats fast, you completely freak out, you have to stop and you're shaking. Because attachment, I mean, this seems so weird to us. We think that's natural, right? It is natural. But that's always why I use that example of Lamazopa drowning when he's a little boy. He didn't have fear because he realized in past lives emptiness and knew there was no inherent I. So even though he's drowning, there's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no panic. That's the point. Even if we can work on our minds a little bit of focus every day, a little bit, and you're catching your thoughts as they come, and you notice the irritation because hubby's slurping his coffee, and you deal with it then, you won't have anxiety because you dealt with the problem. But all our lives, we have not been able to deal with the problems. So when I was just recently now watching a series of documentaries about Vietnam War on Netflix, and of course that's where they first started coming up with the PTSD, all the boys coming back. You know, I mean, of course you're sitting there in this war, murdering people, killing people, slaughtering babies, and everyone around you is doing it. So of course you're not dealing with it. And then you come back home, you're going to completely collapse and go mad because there's no way you can deal with. That you weren't dealing with it. None of us know how to deal with anything when we're children, so we build it up. So it's got to come out at some point. So that's why I think if we really began to get some semblance of control over our mind every day, not meaning, oh, I want a calm mind, but be able to somehow know we can learn to be a little bit in charge of what the hell is going on in our thoughts and deal with them when they arise, then there won't be panic and fear. Because you're not holding on to something. We just don't deal with anything, and then it all has to come out later on. Do you understand? That's attachment and aversion. We just think about attachment as, oh, I like chocolate cake, you know. Not like that. Much more subtle. Attachment is constant, unceasing, primordially deep assumption that I must get what I want every millisecond. That's it. That's attachment. So it's like totally frantic, and it's not going to get what he wants. So that's how we all go crazy. But we manage not to go. I mean, for me, it's surprising we're not going completely crazy every day. You know, it's a miracle that we can keep sane. Do you understand? Keep everything under control. It's a miracle, it seems to me. Are we communicating? Yes. Am I communicating you people on Zoom? Good. I mean, attachment's multifaceted. I say it all the time. Attachment can be functioning at the level of the senses. It's so obvious, you know, crave the cake and crave the music and crave the boyfriend. Attachment is attachment getting what you want. Attachment, as another one, is attachment to comfort, your comfort zone. Attachment to, you know, I mean, there's a multitude of ways your attachment will function in relation to every aspect of your life. Some people more ways than others, you know. I mean, some people are attached to food, but totally attached to the shape of their body. So other people completely attached to money, but couldn't care less about food. You know, well, that's the obvious gross level. That's the sensory level, you know. But the other one is much more subtle. That's why the Buddha says basically in the Four Noble Truths, this is effectively the main cause of suffering in day-to-day life, attachment. It's a total shock to us. So all we can do is start hearing that and then putting meat on the bones as we start to practice and recognizing it, you know. And then learning to subdue it, not buy into it, not believe its story. That's a powerful practice. It's a powerful way to apply the antidote to attachment, you know, to know it's a conceptual story, a false expectation, a false mistaken conception that you've been believing in for eons. So even just, as Lamazopa says, even just to think, just to just not believe in it, even though it's still the cake still appears delicious to you from the cake side, but you don't believe it. This is like putting an atomic bomb under attachment, you know. Or the slurping the coffee, a dumbest example. It really is irritating. You're feeling agitated. And I've read that they say that those types of noises are the things that make people want to kill each other. Like these personal sounds, snoring and slurping and Do you understand? Chewing, all this, make people completely crazy. Because it's so personal, it's true, I can understand that. So just to even know, even though you're feeling irritated, but because you've got control over your speech, you're talking to yourself, it's just a sound, Robina. You don't believe it, but it's hard because we're so addicted to our own viewpoints. We're just like lemmings, you know? Yeah.
So for people who are starting to realize that our delusions are nonsense and we're not believing in them
Our
as
delusion, our lies, yeah,
Our
misconceptions,
lies.
yeah.
and that, you know, we're not starting to believe in them as much anymore. I still feel
That's
like
right.
I still feel like I'm kind of stuck with a tantruming brat, like
what?
wiggling inside of me.
What?
And a what?
Stuck with what?
Like a tantruming brat.
Oh, no, it's
that's-
true. These are very, it's got to know that they're very deep, these habits.
Yeah, and even though I'm not buying into.
That's right, it's still suffering, it's still, no, it's
And
just-
it feels wonderful to not be so caught up in.
of course it is, yes, exactly, rejoice in that,
I still sort of feel stuck
of course.
with the little.
No, of course,
tantrum.
darling, because it takes, that, all that says is that it's deeper than we think. So we have to have long-term patience with ourselves. Knowing how subtle it is, knowing how unbelievably subtle this attachment goes. To be very humble and patient with ourselves.
So like in that moment when it's arising, like that little brat, the anxiety.
Well, yeah, that's why that's why, see, also the most profound practice the Buddha would suggest is why the very first level of practice is control the servants of the mind, speech and the fist. Don't punch the hubby, you know, walk out the kitchen instead. That's part of our problem. We don't, I mean, in terms of spiritual practice in day-to-day life in the world, when it comes to people loving mindfulness, we never discuss speech as a very specific practice, but in Buddhism, it's a very specific practice. It's so much harder to control the thoughts, but at least you can begin to control the words before they vomit out.
Mhm.
That, I think, if we, in our relationships at work, at home, in the street, if we could control the speech, 99% of our problems would be averted. Do you understand?
Mhm.
It's a huge practice.
Yeah.
So you tell the brat to shut up.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's still
definitely.
storming, it's okay. But it's one step at a time, you know, and then delight in our progress at each step of the way.
Sometimes I get stuck because the delusions are so frequent and yeah, I'm not.
Of course they're
acting
there.
on them.
They're there all the time.
They're there all the time.
Of course they are.
It gets difficult to not identify with them. If they're
Of course it
with
does. And that's our
someone.
biggest problem too. We assume this is me. This is the deepest mistake. This is me, we say. Or it's you. You know, if I'm annoyed with hubby, just the slurping, that at that moment, I've got my angry glasses on, he looks revolting, and we believe he is revolting. We forget that it's not even, we almost think, and also we think it's in him, we don't even know it's our mind. He is revolting. That's how shocking the delusions are. They make the cake look divine, or they make the hubby look ugly. And we believe it. That's the killer. And then we don't even realize it's our mind that's doing it. We really believe it's him. This is the shocking part. I mean, there's so many stages of practice to get to. You know? It's incredible. So one step at a time, honey, and rejoice in your progress. What else, people?
We must have cameras in our house.
Say it
We
again.
must have cameras in our house.
Because they're all exactly the same. That's why I mean, because I'm so impatient, I can't even, I always joke about it, but I can't imagine. Oh, living with the same person in the same house. Forget about the same bed. I'm sorry. I'd rather go to prison. Since a little girl, I thought that actually. I just must have nun's karma, that's all. The thought. Even for me, the one of having just to compromise and have to discuss everything that you do together. I can't even imagine living that way. I mean, I said maybe I'm so selfish. I can't believe it. All right, people, you choose your practices. It'd be very courageous to live as another human being, I think, and to continue to love them. I think so. It takes a lot of courage, I think.
What was that?
A lot of courage to be patient and to live with a human being for many, many years and know them intimately, including their farts and their snores, and still learn to see the better part of them. That takes a lot of work, I say. Congratulations if you've managed. What? At this moment, there you go.
But it is a practice.
Non-stop. So that's why it has to be non-stop practice. You can't, unless you're a bodhisattva, it's non-stop practice. It's a fact. It's just a fact. That's why most relationships don't. That's what most relationships don't. What's wrong?
Nothing.
No.
That's why most relationships don't succeed, because our impatience and our anger and our attachment are too strong, and then we blame the other person. That's it. That's why most relationships turn bitter, and I'm surprised we don't kill each other more often. You know, I can't believe it. It's incredible. It's just, to me, it's asking too much of an ordinary human being. You know,
It's kids.
and then I know that. I can't.
It's like total
Amazing. I can't believe it. Anyway, people, what else? What other questions? Come on. Yes, Paola. What time? 7:30. Yes, Paola. It's 8:30. Yes, Paola, sweetheart, talk to me from Italy in the middle of the night for poor Paola.
Good
One-
evening, Venerable Robina.
2 a.m. for her, 2:30 a.m. Well done, Paola.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, sweetheart.
Okay. You mentioned the fact that even small things can cause big trouble among people.
Right.
Even if, for example, if someone spills the coffee on the table, why
Right.
do even small things like that disturb us sometimes?
That's attachment to
Attachment.
things. That attachment there is the attachment that wants things to be the way that we think they should be. We have our own, it's attachment to getting attachment to getting what I want. That's that attachment. It's not attachment to food. It's not attachment to sex. It's not attachment to music. It's attachment to things being the way that I think they should be, especially if it's your table. You know, they spill coffee on your table because your table is supposed to be clean, you know. So it's just attachment to things being the way we want. This is a very deep one. And this is really runs everything.
And once we recognize them, how can we lessen our aversion, even if it's a small thing?
Well, that's you by asking that question, you already gave the answer. You recognize it, and then you argue with it. You recognize it, and you argue with it. So if you invite, you know, a person sitting at your table and they spill coffee on your table and you catch your mind and you hear, Paola, there's my attachment to getting what I want, then you have to argue with it. You just tell yourself, well, that's just attachment. And then you learn to be brave and you accept the coffee on the table. That's what opposite to attachment. Anger is you accept it. Accepting that the light is red instead of green is how you stop being agitated and angry and upset about the red light. You accept that it is red. Do you understand me? You catch yourself.
Absolutely.
And the light is red. The coffee is on the table. The person is shouting. He is slurping his coffee. You learn to, you argue, you know your attachment wants it to be different. And then you say, it is okay. This is how it is. It's not easy, but that's what you say to it. You tell attachment to be quiet. And so you argue with it and you accept this is what's happening. Anger is, how dare the light be red? It's denying reality. Anger is denying reality. The coffee shouldn't be there. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't say this. You shouldn't do that. That's anger. But the reality is there is coffee on the table. The light is red. So you accept it. That's the opposite of it, anger. Practice slowly, slowly, darling. It's hugely hard. It just means being flexible. Attachment and anger are very inflexible. They're very stubborn, you know. You can see why people go crazy, screaming. Anger is should this and should that and why not this and how dare that, he this and she this. It's like we're unable to bear that is how it is, that we scream and shout and yell about it. But it is that. This is how it is. It is that way. Now, if you can change it, then please change it. But what if you can't? That's the practice of patience. It's hugely powerful practice. It's not passivity, it's intelligence. So start with the small things. Then you build it up. It's facing reality. Anger is not seeing reality. Anger is denying that that's how it is. It shouldn't be this way, we say, you know, but it is this. That's what that's seeing reality. It's very powerful. Doesn't mean being passive. If you can change it, great. Especially if it's bad things in the world, you change. Like Martin Luther King said, it's good to find fault. Look at the injustice, look at the racism, but then he says, then you say, what can I do to help? That's profound. Just being angry all the time. Like, so if there's, you know, Suzanne trying to do all her work to help suffering people, but part of the problem with people who go out and help in the social work and everything, we're full of anger. It shouldn't be this, and look at this, and look at that, and look at this. That's just anger. Anger is disastrous. Anger is like a nightmare. Seeing that it is that way with a calm mind and then saying, how can I help? That makes it productive. Anger just destroys us. Do you understand, Paula?
Yes, Venerable Robina,
Yeah.
excuse me, why does this happen with the closer we are to people, the more we cannot stand.
That's right,
sometimes.
exactly. Because I mean, it was obvious because we know each other so well, and there's a strong history with each other, you know. I mean, of course, not just this life, but Buddhism would say from past lives, strong karmic history with each other. So very familiar with each other, very close, you know. So they're the ones we get the most. I mean, that's why I always joke, but it's true that 40% of the women who get murdered on this planet are murdered by the husband or the close the man in their life, you know. It's not against men, it's just it's the intensity of the emotion living in the same place, and everything becomes huge, isn't it? The smallest things become so huge. It's terrible and sad. What else, people? Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Hello, Naga. Where are you, Naga? What country are you in?
Hi, Venerable. I am in North Carolina. I used
Oh,
to
good,
attend.
sweetheart. Good,
I'm in
darling.
Asheville right now.
What?
Asheville.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Do you
I
have any
used to
questions,
take all your
sweetheart?
classes in Raleigh,
Oh, good, okay. Do you have any
and
questions?
then I moved here. But I study debate now.
Oh, you
I
do?
go
With
to
whom?
with Atisha,
Where? Who?
Atisha, the Italian school,
Oh, wonderful. Good. Is
Lama
that
Zopa. Yeah,
going well?
and then Sarkang Institute in India.
Wonderful. Well done.
Yeah,
You're going well.
thank
You're
you.
studying hard.
Huh?
Are you studying hard?
Yes, it is
Good.
difficult.
But you're good at yours.
Yeah, we
I'm very
did
happy.
the Tariq, Lorig, and Dudra, and
All
now,
of this, you're studying all of this. Wow, I'm so happy. So
yeah,
you recognize, so you can hear in your studies, you can hear what I'm talking about. Yeah.
yeah, I'm hearing all the stuff you're talking
Right.
about
Exactly.
the mind.
That's where it all comes from, darling.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good, sweetheart. Pleasure.
Always love your class.
Good, sweetheart. Good. What else, people? Daniela, where are you, darling?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Where are you?
In Brooklyn.
Oh, in Brooklyn. Oh, just down the road. Okay, good.
Not too far. I try
Not
to
too
come
far.
in.
All right, sweetheart.
Yes.
And you have any questions, Daniela, or you're just thinking about all this stuff?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's just, like you said, it's just sometimes it's more about you're about practicing patience and
Yeah.
and but I guess I'm ruminating over just something that you said the last time was about like having it's kind of like developing over time. It's practice.
Yeah.
You're talking about
Yes,
practice,
that's
but
it, darling. Exactly.
but I know for myself that sometimes it is that I feel like maybe I reached my limit.
Yeah, I
you
get you.
know?
I get you exactly. I know exactly.
And it is sometimes with certain situations people have brought that there are certain situations where you do reach your limit and maybe
Yes, it's true.
you
Yeah, you
just
really get, I think what you're saying is you get to the point where you really know nothing more can happen unless you just, it's almost too much sometimes. That's why we've got to have a lot of intelligence and self-respect and know what we can, sort of like knowing how much weight you can carry. And sometimes if we put ourselves in situations where we can't handle it, that's when we'll lose the plot. And it's just, we really need to have intelligence. We really need to be aware of what we can handle. You understand? It's so sensible, which demands knowing our minds well.
So I think that that's more, it's really trying to make that distinction as to when is it you've reached the maximum versus.
That's right. According to what you're able now, instead of having this, oh, I've got to keep practicing patience. We've got to know what we're capable of. You know, sometimes some things are just too much. So we've got to protect ourselves. This is very, very serious. It's very true, actually. It's really like self-respect. We need to know, and it's humility with ourselves, not pushing ourselves relentlessly. We'll go crazy, you know. I mean, the mind's a fragile thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, good, Daniela. Thank you, Don. Kathleen, what about you?
Hi, thank you so much. You know, I'm listening to what everybody is saying. I'm going through something where I'm really suffering. I come from a family, all my sisters, if they didn't marry an alcoholic, they are alcoholic. My brother's dying from alcoholism. My sister's dying from addiction.
Oh, heartbreak, darling.
I have a situation and they come to me. You know, my mother died. They can't haunt her anymore. And I made a promise to myself to watch these boundaries. So my question is, I'm now actively involved trying to help my sister not lose her home.
Yeah.
Her daughter's living with her. I'm back lending her money. She spent her life being very materialistic and wanting. She has nothing. So I am suffering and I am really trying very hard. And, you know, this patience, I got very angry. I've been very angry. I've turned it inward and now I'm kind of down the hole a bit, you know, and now I'm actively trying to climb out of the hole.
I understand, darling.
So how do we help this type of suffering, deep suffering that I'm feeling? And then almost that it is too much. I am overwhelmed.
This is why, Kathleen, it's so hard, because when it's family, we have all this kind of, I mean, on the one hand, the virtuous side of things is I want to help people. That's called compassion. You could never fault that. But the trouble is when it's close family, it's mixed with this guilt. Like I'm unable to say no. But I think that's where, if you can have them all live in your house and you can pay for everybody's things, if you are capable, then go for it, baby. But if we're not capable, it's like you're going to drown and everybody else will drown with you. But the other thing is this, Kathleen, if you can have the courage to have the wisdom to do what is right for them, and that might be very clearly to say no to your sister for their sake. So it's both things, but to have that kind of wisdom, that takes a lot of courage. So get a feeling of what's right for your sister. I mean, are you seeing my point? You can see that she's been abusive of money all her life. She's now completely a disaster, and now she's freaking out and she wants you to fix it, to pull her out of the hole. It's not your job. And maybe for her, it is not appropriate, but that's scary because you're then going to risk people not liking you, Kathleen. And our biggest attachment is to be seen as a good girl.
Yeah. I think I'm over worrying about whether they like me or not. My thing is I want everyone to have a roof over their head, you know. So
of course you do, and that's marvelous. But I mean, so that's where you got to decide if you can do it at the same time as keep your own sense of self and keep your own sanity, then do it. But if you think it's not beneficial for them to keep picking them up, you've got to find that wisdom inside you.
Yeah.
Because for one sister, it might be right, but for the other one, it might not. And that's a hard one to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand me? You've got to see if they're capable of responding to it, of coming to the party. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's not easy.
No, it's very difficult because you're teetering on, you know, when somebody is so low, I'm worried about them being suicidal because now their back is up against the wall.
That's right. I understand, darling.
Yeah.
So you need a lot of courage and a lot of wisdom.
I'm drawing on all the wisdom that I can, and thank you very much.
Good, darling. Be brave.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, good one. Good. You know, and sometimes, I mean, it sounds a bit, it's not meant to be cosmic, but it's Dalai Lama always, Dalai Lama always says, always aspire to do what is most beneficial. That means for you and them, aspire for that. You don't know quite how it would look, but want to have this brave attitude to want to do what's most beneficial. And then that will guide you to make the right decision when the time comes. Do you understand me? That's important. And to have courage, you know, and try and try to and have the courage to say no if you have to. But it's got to come for not out of resentment or anger. That'll just destroy you. Out of what's most beneficial for them, even though they won't think so. It's like tough love, and don't pretend it's tough love. If it is genuinely tough love, it'll be the right thing to do, and then you'll accept the consequences, and they have to learn to live with it. But you know, there's only, that's why I like to use the example of where you're in a tennis match with each of these people and you're playing the best they're hitting you all these crazy balls. You have to do your best to hit them, to work with what they've got. But if you know, if they're not going to do anything properly, there's only so much you can do. You can't be both the people. They've got to do their bit, you know. And if they're not going to, you can't save them. You can't. Because so this is where we're going to have some wisdom. It's not easy. It's not easy, darling.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well done. Keep going. Time to go home. Time to go home. Yes, go on.
This was a more of a philosophical question, but I've been doing a bit of studying thanks to
Okay, good. Yes.
And I just kind of want to make sure I get some terms correctly.
Yeah.
Let's say, what are the aggregates of a very subtle mind if it's not inherently?
Sorry, again, what?
So the very subtle mind, if it's not inherently existent, then what are the aggregates that we are imputing upon it?
What do you mean by aggregates imputing upon the very subtle mind? That's a meaningless concept. That's a completely wrong question.
Okay, so the very subtle mind, it's like this very.
It's simply the subtlest level of your mind.
Mhm.
That's all. It's the subtlest level of your mind. So then question.
But then it doesn't exist inherently,
But
right?
nothing does.
Nothing does,
So
right?
that's a given.
So then what are the aggregates of it? Like what
There
are
aren't
the
any
pieces of
aggregates
it?
of it. I mean, what are the pieces of it?
Yeah,
This moment of very subtle mind and the next moment of very subtle mind. That's all.
okay.
That's all. Everything has parts. Everything doesn't, I mean, aggregates is a very specific term Buddha uses for the 5 components of a person. So you wouldn't say what are the aggregates of the very subtle mind.
Okay, so the question, no good to
That's
begin with.
it's just what are the parts is what you're asking.
Uh-huh.
Aggregates are just 5 parts of a person. That's just the term you use. Well, there's something that existing, everything that exists has parts. Well, the very subtle level of mind has this moment of very subtle level of mind, and the next moment of very subtle level of mind. They're the parts of it. That's it.
Oh, okay, good to.
That's all. That's all.
My next question would be, so what's the difference between Rigpa and the very subtle mind? Sometimes they,
What do you mean by, I don't use that, we don't use that term in Gelugpas.
Rigpa,
No.
no use. Okay,
It's a term that's used very specifically by the new Mapas, I think, and other people.
okay.
So very subtle mind
Is
is simply, is consciousness, it's this gross level, subtle level, very subtle level.
Okay.
That's all. So it's not, okay, very subtle mind doesn't mean it's virtuous.
okay,
It's just like the microscope of your mind, you have to use it to realize emptiness.
so it's more of like a vehicle
Yeah, that's
to
all.
realize.
This way of talking, mind is just mind. And if you have, and if you're a great meditator and you get to the very subtle level, then okay, then you can use it to merge it with emptiness, then it's fantastic. But everyone's got a very subtle mind, ants and dogs and hell beings. When they die, then they go to the next life. There's nothing holy about it.
What is the experience of the very subtle mind?
Oh, no idea, sweetheart. I haven't tasted it. I don't know. But if you're a yogi, okay, if you're a yogi in that experience, I mean, even just getting shamatha, sweetheart, a sutra technique, shamatha, the bliss, the ecstasy, the rapture, as Rami Yeshi calls in there, is inconceivable. And that's gross in comparison with this one.
So even that bliss of shamatha is gross in comparison to the
Yeah,
rest of it.
that's why I have to have the tantric. Well, that's right. Yeah, because the tantric methods where they talk about very subtle mind. the tantric methods are much more powerful, get to a subtler level of mind. And if the yogis have accessed that, and the bliss and the cloud is inconceivable, that's how they talk.
So let's say you're doing the shamatha on the description that Lama Yeshe gives. Where,
What do you mean?
Let's say you're meditating on the instruction of the sort of the practice of
Okay, you're using the first stage of Mahamudra meditation, you're concentrating on the mind.
Yeah.
Okay, good, then.
And I was given an instruction through another tradition.
Okay, yeah.
In the Kadampa tradition through NKT.
Who? Okay,
NKT.
fine, yes, okay.
And
But that's also good look for teaching, should be the same.
yeah. So that's why I like hanging out here too, you know.
Okay, good.
There's, let's say, for example, you know, you're kind of going into what was described to me as sort of where you kind of search for the self and negate the self, and then you negate the phenomena that appears to it, and sort of going through it like that. And then I had a very lovely experience, but is that just shamatha? Let's say for that concentration and mental suppleness is just shamatha, right?
I would say concentration, yeah, that concentration is shamatha. It was a moment of it, yeah, it wouldn't be the actual shamatha. I mean, if you have that, your mind will be subtle, and you have no sensory, you'll be way more subtle. If you have a moment of pleasure of the mind being focused, that's very nice, a nice taste.
Okay.
Shows your potential.
Okay.
Good, okay.
And then let's say for example, you kind of see that mind's potential.
See your mind's potential.
Because I'm not sure what I experienced, but all I can tell you really is that what happened after is that a lot of my delusions, however subtle they were, became very loud to me.
Oh, okay, okay, you just saw your mind more clearly then. That's
Yeah,
all.
so much more clearly.
That's good.
To the
That's a
point
good
where
sign.
it was almost, but I had a little bit of difficulty after. Because it almost felt like, you know, I was in a storm all the time, but I didn't know it. But now suddenly it feels like I can feel every raindrop.
Well, that's good. That's, as Pavanka Rinpoche says, one of the signs of success in learning to meditate is you think your mind's getting worse.
Yeah, sounds
Because you're noticing it, because you're noticing it. So be happy,
Okay.
be glad. And as Lama Zoe says, the dirt's coming out.
Uh-huh.
So be
Yeah.
happy and keep moving. Okay, good job.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, people. Time to go home. Everybody. All right, keep moving, never give up. Okay, and remember we're impermanent. We could die tonight, so be ready for it. And we wake up in the morning, it'll be a bonus, okay? So then we make the most of tomorrow. So we keep going, all of us. Daniela, Kathleen, Naga, everybody, be brave, and never give up. Jang Trup Centro, Grimboche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Yuchi, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gong Du, Favasho, Gewa Di, Nudo Dag, Lama Sange, Drup Gune, Droa Chikyang Malupa, Dei Sala, Gurpa Sho, and delight in our progress. Please, okay. Much love, people. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.